Hello everyone, it's Jabba. Today I have another Spiral Abyss clear for you, but this one is going to be a little bit different. Instead of showing the clear and who I used, I'm going to be going over my personal methods and mindset going into it, because I know that this reset has been difficult for many, including myself, specifically on floor 12, chamber 1. Let's get started. This time around, I'm going to have a bit of a newer format for the video. First, I'm going to go over a keyword or acronym to help you get your first clear, first 36 stars, or even continue your 36-star run. Second, I'm going to show part of the run while applying each part of the word. Finally, I'll follow up with the full run as the final part of the video. Alright, the word for today is rare. This word will be the key to having successful rotations, especially on 12-1. Rare stands for relax, assess, respond, and finally, exploit. The first step, relax, is the key to beginning the process. It's pretty self-explanatory, but when you're doing runs against these tougher opponents, it's important to keep your composure. Assess means to look at your enemies during combat and ask yourself a few questions such as, what are they doing? How is their dispersion? What are their weaknesses? How much time do I have? And how should I respond? After answering these questions, the next step is to respond. Your assessment will dictate the rest of your actions during your rotation. After assessing the enemy, you must then choose the best course of action. And finally, after choosing said course of action, you need to exploit the enemy's weaknesses and actions to ensure success. After your rotation is done, just repeat the process until you've destroyed everything in your path. Remember, the first step is the most important. Relax. You got this. You'll be fine, and if you mess up, it's okay. Just try again. Alrighty, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the gameplay and see how we can apply each of these steps within this acronym to ensure success for our Spiral Abyss run. Alrighty, so right at the beginning, I'm already conducting 2 steps of the rare acronym. I was completely composed while obtaining this footage, and I knew that I was completely capable of beating these enemies. Take it one step at a time, and worry about the opponents currently in front of you. Next, I begin my assessment by asking those same questions that I mentioned earlier. There are 4 enemies. They've just spawned in and are within close to medium range. They have a very close dispersion. The enemies will come to me provided I do not move forward. The crabs will not put up their shields if I stay at this distance, resulting in them having to jump, putting them within range with no overt form of damage mitigation. Now I decide my response is to keep the enemies within close proximity to each other to deal the maximum amount of damage possible to save time and move on to the more difficult upcoming enemies. Now that I know my course of action, I begin to exploit the enemy's close dispersion and movement patterns. I use the time that I remain stationary to use Nahida's skill in combination with Raiden's skill to proc that quicken reaction while having a guaranteed form of damage on the enemies. I use Nahida's burst for the elemental mastery transfer to my on-field character. I then use Jean's burst to swirl Electro and shred their Electro resistance. Following that, I use Yolan's skill, then burst, to catch the particles triggering the bloom reaction. Finally, I use Raiden's burst as my main form of damage. The constant Electro application in a wide area of effect constantly triggers Hyper Bloom with higher damage numbers due to the elemental mastery transfer previously mentioned. Alright, so now we're coming up on our second set of enemies for this half. Remember, rare. These enemies are beefy and do a lot of damage, but it's okay. Just calm down, relax, and continue on to your assessment. During my assessment phase, I can see that we have 2 consecrated beasts, one Hydro and one Dendro. Each will apply the respective element if it hits you. I know that the Dendro beast's main form of damage are a plunging tail whip attack, followed by a ranged vine attack where it gains distance. The Hydro beast will not do anything to gain distance so long as I stay close to it. At range, it has a triple Hydro wave attack that can 2 to 3 shot my characters as they are slightly squishy and unshielded, as well as its own form of plunge attack at range. At close range, it also has a plunge attack as well as a death roll that can one-shot my characters. I know the Dendro beast will do a wheel attack to close the gap toward me, and the Hydro beast will swim toward me. Both have extremely high resistance to any attacks, but I know Jean can help shred that resistance. I then decide my response is to run to the back wall to try and bait them toward me, using iframes, invulnerability frames, granted to me by each character's burst to keep me from taking too much damage. Dealing with them at close range is slightly easier as I can deal damage to both of them while being able to clearly see their close ranged attacks. As much as it is dangerous that they can 1 to 2 shot me, it beats having one sit farther back, hitting me with ranged attacks that can do the same thing. Now I'm going to move on to the exploit phase. The rotation stays the same as before with some slight variation. I like to use Yelan's skill, then burst before using Jean's burst in the case that I get hit. Yelan's high HP pool somewhat mitigates the risk of her getting 1 to 2 shotted in the case that something does go wrong or I'm unable to analyze an attack that's incoming. Being that enemies are also very beefy, I always use Nahida's skill at the beginning of the rotation to keep her mark refreshed as the fight is much longer than the previous one. Alrighty, so there's the guide to my mindset when I'm doing any sort of Spiral Abyss clears, especially since I'm always hunting for those 36 stars, my mindset behind rotations, how enemies work whenever the characters I have are in combat. It was definitely a bit of a challenge to be able to put this on paper, but I definitely want to do something like this again. I hope you learned something. If you did enjoy the video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, as well as leave any feedback you have in the comment section below. I would definitely appreciate it. Now without any further ado, let's go ahead and move on to the meat and potatoes of the video, the actual clear itself.